Yes, good evening, everyone, and welcome back to the Football Tribe UG channel. Robert Kesakos is your usual suspect. Welcome back to yet another live broadcast on your favorite football updates channel. It's a pleasure to be back with you on this beautiful Saturday evening slash night or afternoon, depending on wherever it is that you're joining us from. I do come on a very, very sad note if you're an Arsenal fan because it wasn't good news today afternoon because Arsenal lost to AFC Bournemouth by 2 goals to 1 to put back the Premier League title literally in Manchester City's hands. We're going to be discussing that. And is there a way back for the Arsenal? We'll be talking about that. We'll talk about the emotions of the Arsenal fans. We'll talk about the reaction that has come up, to Arsenal's way. Now, excuse me, I've been sort of following up on the reaction now from different fora, and it came, I think, from Charles Watts, who called it a horror show on his podcast. I saw one James who was very, very disappointed, literally lost for words in regards to the implications of what he's just seen and everything that falls within that line. Now, I think, okay. So anyways, guys, we'll digest this bit by bit. And I'm happy to be back, first of all. We did not do our Friday night broadcast as well as that of Saturday morning. But I remember, but I did communicate that for those of you that may have gotten your notifications on, we did put out a post on the channel to communicate our absence due to sort of the things that were bound to transpire during the sort of the reasons why I was not going to be around. But nonetheless, or with that said, still, I thought it was going to be a very, very beautiful weekend. First of all, disclaimer, I did not watch the Arsenal FC Bournemouth game. Reason being, I've been traveling. I've been trying to travel as fast as I can, make sure I'm ready to do this broadcast with you. I've been, doing everything literally on bullet pace, just to come here and at least find time to watch some Premier League action, which I haven't, by the way. The game that I managed to catch a little bit snippet of was that game between Liverpool and Fulham, which Liverpool have just won by 2 goals to 0. I remember I was racing to make sure that I catch a glimpse of that, but nonetheless, it did not work out for me. So I have to wait until tomorrow to get some real good action of Premier League football. So, but the elephant in the room is the Arsenal game. First of all, Arsenal fans across the world are very, very disappointed. Now, I do not know who. You look like Michael Jordan, bro. Thanks for the compliment, Panthy. Is it Panthy or Pithny? Oh, Path. I'll pronounce it as Path. First of all, like I say, Arsenal fans across the world are disappointed. I'm not sure many of them will be even eager to tune in this kind of live broadcast. I am not sure any of them is going to be eager to watch any Arsenal podcast in regards to what just transpired today. I'm not sure any of them will be looking forward to listening to any form of analysis, explanation of why the day ended the way it ended. Now, like I said, disclaimer, I did not watch the game. But I remember when the starting 11s came out, I looked at that Arsenal starting 11. And as soon as I saw Lewis Kelly on the team sheet, I had a pit in my stomach. I looked over the bench, I had another pit in my stomach. Why? There's no Martin Odegaard on the bench. That meant that he's out and injured. Seeing Lewis Kelly on there meant that Ricardo Calafiori, for some reason, was absent and hence wasn't on the bench. But on the other side, I felt a bit positive seeing Piero Hincap on the bench as well as Ebeleche Eze, But in the grand scheme of things, with that Bukayo Saka also on it, I was thinking to myself, who is going to come in and change this game? Because I knew for a fact that early kickoffs are not very, very easy for any team, especially for teams that have played in Europe the previous week. And that's basically what happened. Nicole says, hello. Hello, Nicole. Good to have you on the podcast. How are you doing? April Fools, isn't that long past? Today is 11th of April. It can be April Fools, So I was looking at that bench and I was thinking to myself, who is going to help this Arsenal side sort of recover? Like I said, and I mentioned this in the build-up, even though my prediction had been a narrow 2-1 victory for Arsenal or 1-0. That had been my prediction. And the result in itself, I don't think I'm too surprised. Why? Not because I flat out thought or felt that Arsenal were going to be beaten. No, not that. But I knew anything could happen. Like I said, teams, when they play in Europe and they have a game at the weekend, they tend to struggle. But then the bigger context in this, you've had an Arsenal side that has been struggling for the last for the previous 3 games. Really, out of the previous 3, they had only 1-1 against Sporting CP by 0-0, needing that late winner from Kai Havertz. They had lost the previous 2 in the 2 different competitions. That was against Manchester City in the Carabao Cup final and to Southampton in the FA Cup. So when I remembered that and reflected on the performances that had been exhibited in all those fixtures, I kept thinking to myself, Bournemouth is a very stubborn side. First of all, they had been 11 games unbeaten prior to this fixture, or 10, thereabout. That's for a reason. They may not have won many games out of those very games, but you knew for a fact they are a stubborn side. And I did mention it in the preview that it was Bournemouth, the only team that beat up against Arsenal, home and away last season. Really, Arsenal had managed to beat them at the Vitality Stadium by 3-2. And we went on to touch up to talk about Gabriel Magalhaes' a poor pass that led to Evan Nilsson's opening goal in that very fixture. So we talked about that, and then we talked about a lot of other things. Of course, injuries were an issue because Eberechi Eze was just returning to training. He was not expected to be in the starting 11. Pierre Hincapié, my expectation was that Ricardo Carafiori would be available. Not the case. We know that Martin Odegaard, we had spoken about that sort of frustrating face that he had displayed when he went off. Or before he went off, actually, when he needed treatment during their 1-0 victory away to Sporting CP. So I knew that the doubts over those. And then in addition to that, you're missing Bukayo Saka, etc., etc. But in this particular case, injuries are not the issue. First of all, when you look at the team sheet, that's a team that I felt that was good enough to compete. It wasn't the perfect team that they could field on any given day. It wasn't the best team that they could field, but it was the best available team that they could field. So, looking at it, watching David Ryan goal, William Saliba, Ben White, Gabriel Magalhaes, Maz Lewis Kelly, Zubimendi, Rice, Kai Havertz, Madueke, Martinelli, Jokers. First of all, I for one, I was also a bit, let me say, a bit disappointed that Trossard was not in the starting 11. But that is in no defense, because that is not to sort of say that if he had started, they would have won. Because even he too, his form is literally been close to non-existent in the second part of the season when you look around. So a lot of what has happened today from the best, because I've been able to catch up on the highlights and a bit of reviews here and there to sort of formulate my mind about this game and to give me the impression of the kind of game it was. First of all, Arsenal did not show any signs of a champion in waiting, of a team that wants to win a Premier League title. They did not show that. They were not hungry enough. They were not desperate enough. Now, I understand having a bit of a drop-off in energy, in rhythm, especially if you played a midweek game away from home and in the UEFA Champions League. It can be very hostile. It can be very energy draining. But that kind of performance, that kind of energy that they displayed today, based on the reviews that I've seen, that's very, very poor. It's not the show of a team that wants to win the Premier League title. Two, it puts a very big question mark on their Premier League title credentials. Are they ready to win it? Are they capable of winning it? I think they are capable of winning it. I remember saying this. Have you ever watched a team? Have you ever watched a game of football between your team, a team that you support, and the opponent's team, and you wished that your team was doing everything the opponents were doing? So basically, today, that's what it felt for the Arsenal fans. Everything that Bournemouth did on the pitch, it's what they had hoped their team would do. But that was not the case. I think, and I stand to be corrected, I bet you not, there is a majority of Arsenal fans, okay, maybe not majority, but a good chunk of Arsenal fans, well, some are thinking to themselves, is there a world where we swap Mikel Arteta out for the remainder of the season for somebody that can actually guide us to pieces of silverware? Take an example, and this is not to have a dig at Mikel Arteta, but it's to question his, just got here, bro, what's the topic? Oh, Arsenal lost. That's the topic. They basically put the Premier League title back in Manchester City's hands. Thanks, Ora, for asking, but kindly like the broadcast. So, I bet you not. You put this team in Jose Mourinho's hands right now, and he'll guide them to the Premier League title, and he will guide them to the triumph of the UEFA Champions League. It's not to say, however, that Mikel Arteta, he's not going to clinch it. But that result, those previous three performances, prior to today's performance, is the kind of performance that you question your manager about. We questioned it in the aftermath of losing the finals of the Carabao Cup. Yes, Manchester City were better, but it did not feel like Manchester City were miles apart good, really Arsenal was somehow good. It felt like Arsenal was so poor that Manchester City looked too good in that sort of sense. When it came to against Southampton, more or less the same story. When it went away to Sporting CP, I remember saying this. You watched Sporting CP attempt these kinds of passes, the penetrative passes, looking to break the lines more times than Arsenal did, even though they were not being very, very successful about it. They were still trying to do it anyway. Hi, LFC. Good to have you back. It's been quite a while. I hope you're doing all right. So you felt that way, about that Arsenal team. Haven't been here in ages. Exactly. That's why I'm wondering, how have you been? Where have you been at? So I said this, that whereas Sporting Lisbon did not win, they did so many things that I would have loved to see Arsenal do, but Arsenal were not doing, Now, fast forward, when you watch, please bear in mind, the highlights I watched were about 4 minutes and 45 seconds, thereabout, or close to 5 minutes. And there's only 2 moments where Arsenal attempted to score from open play, from the highlights. Now, highlights are, first of all, a snapshot of what transpired in the entire course of the game. In other words, they are a summary of the key moments that were in the game. And when I watched that Arsenal team, or those highlights, the Victor Gyökeres goal scored, and he was offside. Declan Rice's attempt that was served by George Petrovic to go into a corner kick, and then the penalty. Then the other incident, I think, is from Kai Havertz. Now, remember, the penalty incident is itself like a third sort of result of a corner kick, with Gabriel, trying to, score, and then the other guy handles the ball in the area. His arm is way up, and it's given as a penalty. So then the other was Kai Havertz from the set piece, again, corner kick by Declan Rice. He hits that ball from close range, slightly over the bar. Those are Arsenal's key moments. Those were Arsenal's key moments. Now, on the other side, Bournemouth scored 2 beautiful goals from open play. In the first instance, in the first goal, Noni Madueke is sleeping on the job. He does not drop his man. He loses his man. But also at the back post, who is closing in on Junior Kropi? Nobody, you know. Of course, you can hardly blame David Raya. When you watch the second goal that they concede, Martin Zubimendi loses his man like he had weights tied on his legs. It looked like he could not run no longer. And this is the kind of argument we've been making over some time. That look, as good as he's been, he needs to be, he needs not to start certain games. Why? He's fatigued. It's cumulative fatigue. He's tired. And sometimes it's going to show. It may not show in the opening 45 minutes. It may show in the last 20 minutes of the game. It may show in the last 30 minutes of the game. And that's when it matters the most. You know? So, I know I've sat here on a good couple of occasions and made a case for Christian Nogard to start in some games. First of all, you had Christian Nogard on the bench. I've also sat on this very in this very chair, and made the argument of how in some games Arsenal need to quit playing with the double pivot. In other words, in this particular game, for example, and again, this is not to suggest that if he had played with a single pivot, the result ultimately would have been maybe better. But it's to suggest that maybe the effort in building up or in trying to create chances to score would have been different. Allow me to take you back. Sometime back, I don't remember, this might have been anywhere between 2015 and 2017, thereabouts. All I remember, I think it was Louis van Gaal in charge of Manchester United. So I understand, LFC. Just give me a minute. I remember Arsenal losing to Manchester United by 3-1, and the man of the match in that game was David De Gea. Why? Arsenal had created all sorts of chances to try and win that game, but De Gea felt like he had super glue in his hands that he put out everything that came his way or caught it. Now, if Arsenal had had a similar performance to that and still lost, Arsenal fans would have said, well, we did our best. It was not good enough to win us the game, but I think we take solace in knowing that we created lots of chances, we could not parry them, the goalkeeper was too good, and something like that. That wasn't the case today. So, LFC says, we won a trophy in rugby today. Congratulations upon your triumphs today. Can you shout out, Portadon, a rugby under 14 on their win in their Ulster Plate final versus Banbridge. Please do. Okay, thank you so much, LFC. LFC is a Liverpool fan and a rugby sort of enthusiast. I think he plays rugby based on what he updates us with. So congratulations to you, LFC, and your team of Portadown upon your win in the under 14s. Congratulations on your piece of silverware. We wish you the best of luck going forward in the future. So yes, you do play. The reason as why I put a disclaimer on some of these things is because I have no evidence of them. I can only take your word for it, And I remember I asked somebody on the channel some time ago what city they were from, and they gave me a city. So as soon as I read it out, then they came back in the comment section back with, a different city. You say, I'm going to have a nap. Actually, goodbye. I'm so tired. Okay, good luck. Thank you so much for chipping in today. So back to the Arsenal guys. Let me bore you not. So that lack of effort, that lack of sharpness, that lack of creativity, because if Arsenal had had created, let's say, 10 clear-cut chances and missed them, we would be saying, yeah, they bottled it because they did not bury their chances. I'm not Spanish, but I'm having siesta. Okay, I don't know what siesta is. So, again, here are the key statistics from the game. Arsenal had an XG of 2.41. Remember when I said I do not believe in XG? You know, like I feel that sometimes it's overrated, and it is. And today is one of those days. Bear with me. First of all, they had an XG of 2.41. Bournemouth had an XG of 1.2. Both teams had only 3 shots on target. And I've given you, one was the penalty, 2 was the shot from Declan Rice, and then the other was, what was that? I'm trying to recall the other attempt. So, but they had 4 shots off target. Bournemouth had 3. They could only dominate the ball to the tune of 53% compared to 47% of Bournemouth. So that tells you of how close it felt. Like I said, the summary of it feels like Bournemouth wanted it more. In any case, Bournemouth played like the team that wants to be champions, whereas Arsenal played like the team that, that were in a comfortable position, that literally had nothing to lose on the day, and yet they had everything to lose. First of all, like we've seen many times this season, they've missed out on an opportunity to go 12 points clear before Manchester City play tomorrow. 2, they missed out on an opportunity to toy with Manchester City psychologically. That's a missed opportunity. They missed out on an opportunity of relaxing their own minds. Why? Because they have a game next week, midweek on Wednesday. And after that game, against Sporting CP in the reverse fixture of the UEFA Champions League, which they could lose because of they're going to be in very, very low spirits. They're going to be under so much pressure mentally, psychologically, going into that game. And they do not need that. They need to ease their minds. The other thing is that they've given Manchester City what they wanted. Because what Manchester City wanted, first of all, they had hope. Manchester City had hope. Now they have the faith. 2, it's not just faith. They have the belief. Why? Because there's an opportunity to grab. And where's the opportunity? Like I keep saying, Man City have a game in hand. That game against Crystal Palace. In the context prior to today, had they won that game, the point difference was going to be 6, between them and Arsenal. But then they have a game against Arsenal next weekend. If they won that game, it would put them at only 3 points behind Arsenal, and pray and hope that anything happens between there and then. Between in the aftermath of that until the end of the season, that maybe things happen for them in their favor, that they eventually clinch it. Now, what they probably have been praying for or hoping for has just happened. In other words, if they do go ahead and win those games, where do we land? First of all, if they can win their game tomorrow against Chelsea, that means the points are going to be reduced to 6. If they win their game in hand, that means the points are reduced to 3. If they beat up against Arsenal, that means they're all square on points. Isn't that the ideal world? Isn't that the perfect world where they would have hoped to be? Isn't that what they would have been praying for? Because we know that Manchester City are a very high-scoring team. Arsenal has a better XG, that's true, but it's a gap that they can still close, because the goal difference, Arsenal only has a 6-goal difference, better than Manchester City. And that's the 2 games in hand that Manchester City have. In other words, score, maybe beat Paris 3-0, beat Chelsea, which is very, very possible, 2-0 or 3-0, and you close that one in. Then you can make up the difference when you even meet. Actually, if you can beat up against Arsenal, you reduce their own deficit, even if it is by 1 goal, and increase yours by similar goal, and you're done. So, in losing to FC Bournemouth, Arsenal have walked like an altar boy and handed the Charles in the form of the Premier League trophy to Manchester City and say, do with it whatever you want. So the question is, what are Manchester City going to do with it? We can only wait and see. Now, the sad thing for Arsenal is that Manchester City seem to have hit that moment. It may have come very late this season. And when I say very late, it's because there's 8 games left to play for them. But it is the ideal time. Why? They've won the last 2 games in 2 different cup competitions. One guided them to their piece of silverware, which was the Carabao Cup final. The second was beating up against Liverpool by 4 goals to 0. Emphatic win. Now, that emphatic win, what does it give you? Confidence, self-belief, momentum. That's all they needed. The question is, can they carry that from the cup competitions and translate it to the Premier League? Most obviously, they can. It's not a given, it's not a must, it's not a guarantee that they're going to do it. But if you had to make a bet on any team to do it, I think it would be a Pep Guardiola team. Forget that it's Man City, but remember that it's Pep Guardiola. That's what you ought to remember. So, therefore, and by the way, we've been in this place before. First of all, Arsenal have been condemned to their only second defeat at home this season. The first game against Manchester United by 3 goals to 2. So Bournemouth have condemned them to their second of the season. 2, you remember, I don't remember what match day exactly it was, but when Arsenal played Nottingham Forest, that goalless draw, you remember that? It had been an opportunity for Arsenal to go points ahead of Manchester City. You know, to increase on their points gap with Manchester City. They squandered that. Then, the subsequent weekend, because I remember Manchester City themselves too stumbled. The subsequent weekend, they played Liverpool. And again, it was a goalless draw. It was an opportunity for Arsenal to expand on their point gap between them and Manchester City. They squandered that too. Somehow, that's how it's transpired. I don't know if it is fate toying with Arsenal fans, but if they dare clinch this Premier League title, they'll cry tears of joy and tears of sadness. The tears of joy will be that they have won it, that they have clinched it. The tears of sadness will be from this point on until the end of the season. Why? Because it's heartbreaking. When I say cry, if they clinch it, they'll cry 2 forms of tears. They're already crying some. At this stage, they're crying those tears of sadness, the agony of defeat. We constantly talk about the agony of defeat. Now, if they dare clinch it, those will be the tears of joy. But the journey, especially in this moment in the season, they have 6 games left to play. And here's the beauty of it, by the way. Here's the beauty with it. If Arsenal win all their remaining 6 games, that gives them 18 points. It will give them maybe about 88 points. And they would still win the Premier League title if they win all their remaining 6 games, like if they were to be perfect. On the other side, if Man City were to win 7 of their 8 remaining games, that means implying that they would have lost to Arsenal. They would be at 82 points. I think that's where it would land, because maximum points out of 7 games is 21 points. That is 3 times 7. Therefore, they would end at 82 points. So, mathematically, it is still in Arsenal's favor, in a way, like if they can take care of their business. But these last 4 games in all competitions have not been indicative of the fact that they are capable of winning winning the 6 consecutive games in the Premier League that are remaining. Now, and this is what I said. I remember for those of you that are regulars on this channel, you'll know for a fact that we did a video, and I don't remember, it was quite some time back. And we're talking about the Premier League title race. And this was on March 5th. That's when that video was premiered. And the title was, Why the Premier League title race isn't over despite Manchester City dropping points against Nottingham Forest. That was after Nottingham Forest's 2-2 draw, for those of you that get to remember. So we did that video. And then Manchester City went and drew against West Ham United in a 1-1 draw. Again, I think that was the subsequent game. So it felt like, yeah, they've lost the plot. But even then, I did not still believe the same, because, like I've said, for as long as Manchester City are still in it mathematically, they're always going to have a chance, because that's what you need, a chance. 99% hope and belief, 1% chance. That's all you need. That's all you need, that 1% chance. And the belief that you can do it. You remember, I also mentioned this. My worry about Arsenal being that they have to play Manchester City is that they've not beaten Man City at the Etihad Stadium since 2015. But we've seen those kinds of records being broken. So even though I would have reservations with that, that's not what, for me, breaks the jinx. When you look at Arsenal's responsibilities in terms of the remaining 6 fixtures, among some of those, you're going to find a fixture against Newcastle. And that fixture against Newcastle, regardless of what you think of Newcastle this season, they can be the party spoilers. They can be the party spoilers for the Arsenal. They can be their party spoilers. So think of it that way. And it is the next game after Manchester City. After that, they have a game against Fulham. Fulham could be the party spoilers. That's a London derby. They have a game away to West Ham. West Ham could be the party spoilers. West Ham have been party spoilers for Arsenal before, and so have Fulham. So, West Ham, you remember in 2023, that 2-2 draw? Yeah, you think about that. So, and then Arsenal's final game of the season is against Crystal Palace. Crystal Palace could be the party spoilers. In other words, it could slice any way you want it to slice. Manchester City have some difficult games, but nobody that they can't beat and nobody that they can't lose to, the same way it is true for the Arsenal. So their next game is against Chelsea. We know the sort of shape that Chelsea are in. I do not think I have any encouragement. I do not think I have any... I don't think I have any intuitive capital to imagine Chelsea beating Manchester City in the manner that Arsenal fans would be hoping for. Now, it is not impossible, because in football, anything can happen. All I'm simply saying is that given how Chelsea have behaved recently, it looks increasingly unlikely. They've lost to Everton 3-0. They've lost to Newcastle 1-0. Prior to that, I think they had beaten up against Aston Villa 4-1. And prior to that, they had lost to Arsenal by 2-1. Now, on the other hand, or on the other side, in between there, they also got beat by PSG. Man City suffered a double defeat against Real Madrid, so no brainer. But ever since then, the kind of conviction that they have built within themselves with those two victories against Arsenal and Liverpool are invaluable. Why? If you needed an immunity booster and you went for an injection, then vitamins will be the thing. And maybe vitamins and whatever else works for the body. We're not into the anatomy of the body. But if Manchester City needed confidence, belief, and a reason to believe again, they got that reason in their victory against Arsenal, and more importantly, in their convincing victory against Liverpool. So, this is all to say that today, Arsenal did not behave like a team that wants to win a Premier League title. This is the point in the season where you'd bite the upright, the pause of the goal to try and win a game. This is the kind of game, this is the kind of point in the season where you dive into a block knowing that an opposing player is putting on the trigger and ready to go. This is the point in the season where you'd bite someone, for lack of a better word. Not that you should expect it, or not that I would be advocating it. In other words, you do everything it takes to win. For all the criticism that has been pelted in Arsenal's direction, valid and invalid, deserved and undeserved, constructive and unconstructive, in regards to the style of football that they have displayed this season, this would be the point that sort of football counts the most. Why? Because the end would justify the means. If they had won today by 0-0, regardless of how they had scored that goal, would be having a totally different conversation. I don't think it would have been on the style of play even. It would have been on them taking that point lead from 9 points to 12 points in waiting. Good evening, Pressing Kosi. How are you doing, my brother? How are you feeling after that result? I know you're not an Arsenal fan. Last I checked, you're a Liverpool fan. I don't know why I keep forgetting what team you support, but last I checked, I think you're a Liverpool fan. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know why. For some reason, I constantly forget the team that you support. So, this is the point where you do all it takes to get points on board. I remember at the start of the season, in some of the opening few games, or couple of games, when Arsenal were hardly conceding chances, they gave away very little. They played games where teams could not have shots on target and etc. As the season has matured, I've seen that shift. Not because their opponents have become much better, but because are you okay? You'll never walk alone. I'm personally okay. Why? And I think the reason as why I'm okay is because I did not get to watch the game. I caught the highlights, match reports and reviews, because I was traveling. I was racing my way back home from hundreds and hundreds of kilometers away to get back home to sort of catch up the pieces. Maybe if I had watched the game minute for minute, I guess I could have been in a very different state. But I could only follow on the updates during the course of the journey and things like that. But I've been reading all sorts of disappointments from Arsenal fans and how they feel about this. So meanwhile, congratulations upon your win, Pressing Kosi. Liverpool just beat up against Fulham about an hour ago by 2-0. So I did not get the chance to watch that game, only I think very, very final minutes. again, because of my traveling. Now, a lot is going to be said about this Arsenal team. A lot is going to be spoken about Mikel Arteta. Now, I do not think, when they say when a man is down, do not beat them further or put them in agony. I do not think it's going to be the case for the Arsenal, because I'm struggling to think where they're going to get the moral authority to summon the support of the fans. Not that they do not need it, not that they are not going to get it. But I struggle to think how they are going to get the courage to say, come, when Mikel Arteta was doing his post-match press conference, his pre-match press conference, he said words like, bring your lunch, bring your dinner, bring the joy and support the team, that sort of thing. I do not think he would have the courage to say those things again to those Arsenal fans. So, meanwhile, Pedri is here out enjoying himself. Pedri says, ha ha ha, loser, aha, aha. Basically, it's a laugh out. No Premier League, aha, okay. That's, be honest, as an Arsenal fan, you still have hope? Yeah. As an Arsenal fan, I still have hope. Why? Because, like I just stated a few minutes ago, is that it is still within their hands. The same way people are going to say if Man City win all their remaining games, they win the Premier League title, the reverse is true for Arsenal. It's as simple as that. Now, but like I said, given what Arsenal have looked like in their last 4 games across all competitions, where they've only won 1 and lost the other 3, it leaves you no form of encouragement to say that they're going to do what you're asking of them. But in terms of hope, first of all, my hope is in support of the prediction I made at the start of the season. First of all, that they would win the Premier League title. My hope is in knowing that they can turn this around. How they do it, that's up to them. For the first time, I was watching a post-match review before coming on, and there's a very passionate Arsenal fan. I think most of you guys know him, James. I think he used to work with AFTV or something like that. I've seen him on TalkSport, I've seen him on Sky or something like that. And he was busy questioning the type of football that they play today. And by extension, brought other games in question, which was okay. But the tone with which it came, the spirit with which it came, trying to read off his demeanor, I felt like, yeah, that's hitting rock bottom for an Arsenal fan, because everything else that should be making sense to them does not make sense at the moment. And he said, and I quote, that it took him 30 minutes to leave the Emirates Stadium to get home to do the video that he was doing, that he had done. And those 30 minutes or that walk from the stadium back home had not been sufficient enough for him to rid himself of the anger that he felt about the Arsenal game. So that's the gravity of what Arsenal fans are going through in terms of the emotions of it, So, but anyways, it's a very lengthy conversation. Okay, let's see. Pedro says this Raymond guy is obsessed with Eddie Howe sacking. Eddie Howe sacked from Newcastle and Xabi Alonso point. The same way, Pedro, you're quote unquote very passionate and perhaps obsessed about Barcelona, is in the same way he is about Newcastle, only that his standing point at the moment for Raymond Kangumba, and thank you so much, Raymond, is that he thinks that for everything they stand to see as progress, it's Eddie Howe that is standing in line of that or in the way of that progress. So that's his sort of school of thought, Meanwhile, Yannick Bolasie did not fall back on Arsenal. He said, um, all comes from Raya dancing on the ball like he has all game. When your back when your back line is touching the ball more than any offensive player, it is a big problem. Dead stats people get rated for these days. And then he goes on to say, of course, your passing rate's gonna be 95% if you're always passing backwards and side to side, same way wingers who do not lose the ball aren't trying to take on fullbacks safety first. He goes on to say, Raya passing the ball more than Declan Rice or Zubimendi is the strange thing about football today. The players with the least attacking ability touching and passing the ball the most. Now, this is a discussion that we've had before on the channel. And I was talking about the shift in football because that when you go back 10 or 15 years ago, but most probably about 10 years ago, the players that had majority touches on the ball were largely midfielders or attacking midfielders, but largely midfielders or offensive players. Today, when you go to, I do not know if this happens in other leagues as well. I've not chanced myself upon seeing those statistics from other leagues. But I'll tell you for a fact, when you look at the sort of Premier League statistics dashboard, in terms of passes, you'll find that out of the top 10, you'll only find about 3 midfielders. Only 3 midfielders. And those 3 midfielders are Dominic Szoboszlai, are Declan Rice, and Elliot Anderson. All the rest are defenders, whether it's for Arsenal, Chelsea, Brighton, Aston Villa. For example, topmost is Virgil van Dijk, a defender. Lewis Dunk, a defender. Trevor Chalobah, a defender. Joachim Anderson, a defender. John Paul Van Hecke, a defender. Marco Senesi, a defender. Ezri Konsa, a defender. And the numbers beyond the top 10 go on and go on. That's the trend, That's the trend. So, the criticism about that Yannick Bolasie raises is very valid in the larger context of the whole game at large, Adash says, are you Idi Amin? No, please. He's dead. May his soul rest in peace. Kwetuli, that's the Sports Hub. Thank you so much, the Sports Hub, for chipping in. Pressing Kosi says, if Man City wins those 2 games in hand, they will be 3 points behind Arsenal, and their next game is against City. So you're counting on goal difference. No. I wasn't counting on goal difference. As I said simply that Arsenal can only take care of their business. If they win all their remaining games, which is 6 games, they win the Premier League title. Now, it is the same way because everybody following that Arsenal loss is saying if Man City win all their remaining games, they win the Premier League title. Tick, it's true. But I said the reverse is also true for Arsenal. If they win all their remaining games, they can win the Premier League title. However, I also did say that based on how they have behaved in their last 4 games, they do not give you an indication that that is going to be the case. I remember saying something similar when Liverpool were going to play away against PSG, that while Liverpool have the pedigree in the UEFA Champions League, their recent performances had not been indicative of the sort of performances that would give you courage to say, yeah, they're going to get something out of Parc des Princes. And what we evidenced in that game was what we believed to be true, that they had not been good enough in the last couple of games. And that showed. So it is the same thing that is happening with Arsenal. Whereas any Arsenal fan would still hold hope that they can still win it, that is not going to change, that their recent performances do not support that sort of wishful thinking. They do not support that possibility at the moment. It's not to say it is impossible, but at the moment, 3 losses out of 4 is not the kind of result or a report card that you'd want. So, who is going to be blamed or who is going to take the hit for this? Definitely Mikel Arteta, because for him, there's no excuse. Like I said, regardless of what you thought of the starting 11, what you thought of the bench, it won't matter because those that were absent don't count. That team was still good enough to win a game against Bournemouth. They just did not show that they wanted it more, you know. Okay, let's get back to, okay, I read Raymond's comment. Okay, but he legit doesn't talk about anything besides Ed Howe sucking from Ray. No, he has talked about something before. I remember a broadcast where he mentioned, where I asked him a couple of questions and he talked about something. But yeah, oftentimes he does talk about Ed Howe. That's true. Okay, then Pedri says, like, bro, talk about something else. Okay, valid point. Adash, I responded to you. Sports Hub 256, thank you so much for chipping in, my brother. Did you see Mikel Arteta's interview where he said he will leave Arsenal if he doesn't win the Premier League? It's actually crazy. I've not seen that interview. I've not seen it, my brother. But I saw a clip of part of his post-match interview. You know the immediate post-match interview that they usually have while standing before they go to press rooms. And if he had had the option of not doing that post-match interview, he may not have done it. Why? He looked a defeated man. He looked a man lost of hope. He looked a man that lacked that had lost his faith. I don't know if you've ever hit rock bottom. And in that particular moment, reading off his profile, that's what it felt like. He had hit rock bottom. I could read he put on a brave face for the cameras to say what he had to say, to try and analyze the game and break it down and why they had lost. And he talked about, Bournemouth being good, how they had not capitalized on their chances very early on in the game in terms of the first half and things like that. But you could see that if you switch off the cameras, maybe he would squat in a corner and sob off a few tears. That's what I read off of him. He was disappointed. Maybe also the disappointment is that in that moment, he didn't know what he was going to tell his players in the dressing room. Last week, no, not last week, sorry, guys, this very week, on Friday, sometime on Friday, we did a video about Mikel Arteta and his contract renewal at Arsenal. And the club has initiated contract talks with him over a new contract because his current contract runs until June or the summer of 2027. However, both parties do acknowledge that those conversations are better left to be concluded in the summer. And I said this: if Mikel Arteta or if Arsenal do not win a major piece of silverware this season, I do not see a world where Mikel Arteta continues, because how do you summon the courage to go again after that disappointment? Because it wouldn't be the first disappointment. It's been, you remember, I understand you do not give up, but you remember when Jurgen Klopp was sort of largely known as the guy that lost every final literally? After he lost the 2013 Champions League final, he lost the one of 2018, he lost the one of 2022, and everybody thought he would never win the Champions League. He never gave up on that. But for the context of Mikel Arteta is that 6 years, and this would be the 4th year, maybe where he finishes second. How do you then summon the courage to compete again? How do you convince your bosses that if we do ABCD, then we are going to be at the point where we must win, or where we are going to win, because they've done it all for him to win. So if he doesn't win, what's the excuse? So I said, if Arsenal do not win anything, I envision him stepping down as Arsenal manager and walking away, just for his mental health, and sort of try to find a way back with a different team, perhaps with a different whole book, not even chapter, so a whole different book, a fresh, that kind of thing. Just imagine you are him and you lost everything this season. I think that would be the end result if that were to happen. So I hope that responds to it. Okay, Chris says, if Man City wins those 2 games in hand, Okay, I think I talked about that. Adash says, are you Henry Olonga? No, I'm not Henry Olonga. Are you Eddie Kenzo? No, Eddie Kenzo is a musician, so I'm not that. You say 4-1. What do you think of our chances versus Atletico? Are you from Uganda? Adash, yes, I'm from Uganda. Thanks, Adash, for asking. Pedri, first of all, we've seen Barcelona do a comeback before. We all remember, we all have the memories of 2017 when they lost to PSG by 4 goals to nil in the first leg, and they overturned that. So a club with that sort of history, they would be looking at back at that moment and said, we never went on to win the Champions League that season because I think that was at the round of 16, but then they got knocked out, I think, at the quarterfinals. I think by Juventus. Yes, by Juventus. But they will be looking back at that moment and say, if they did it with 4-0, now 4-0, that would have been the biggest odds stacked against them. How about 2-0? Now, I also mentioned in the aftermath of that very game, and I said, Atletico de Madrid won by 2-0, and I made reference to the game that they won by 4 goals to nil, the semi-finals of the Copa del Rey. And I said, whereas Barcelona were not able to mount a complete comeback, but 3-0 a result was an encouragement enough to say they must be looking back at that and say, guys, yes, this time what's changed is that we're going to have to do it away from home, hostile environment. It won't be very easy, but we can still do it. It's not to say it is what is going to happen, but they must believe it is possible. Why? Because they themselves have precedent on themselves that you can try a comeback. You may not always be successful, but you can come back in terms of the goals they've scored on those comebacks. So for the Copa del Rey semi-final, they scored 3. That's all they need. Go to Atletico de Madrid and beat them by 3 goals to nil. Is it too hard a task to accomplish? Obviously, so much so. Is it impossible? No, it is not impossible. So they must be thinking to themselves. And by the way, that victory against Espanyol is the kind of victory that they would have needed equally going into that fixture. It's first of all, it's a derby. Not that if they had lost, it would mean the end of the world for them, but it's of great significance in terms of their overall confidence. So yeah, that's it. Anyways, so I hope I've responded to Pedri about their chances. First of all, going to the Riyadh Air Stadium, you need to find a way to defend better in terms of try and keep a clean sheet, because the last thing you want to avoid is, let's say, going a goal behind, or if you score first and then Atletico de Madrid respond. That's how Tottenham failed to overcome Atletico de Madrid. Every time Tottenham scored, Atletico de Madrid, they somehow let Atletico de Madrid respond, and eventually it ended 3-2. So their comeback could not have been complete. So they'll have the belief. Sevilla won, Atletico nil, 20 minutes. Let me tell you, Pedri, that Sevilla game against Atletico de Madrid is of perhaps the least significance in their season at the moment, if we were to read into their minds. All they are thinking about is how do we complete the annihilation of Barcelona? How do we completely knock them out of the UEFA Champions League? That's what they're going to be thinking about. Why? Because in terms of the space between them and those pushing for a top 4 finish, they have the headroom. They have the headroom to squander even 2 games away. 2 consecutive games. They have already lost to Barcelona last weekend. So even if they were to lose this one, it's not going to be the end of the world for them. In any case, it would matter less to them if, let's say, Real Betis came within, let's say, 2 points behind them, for as long as they win that game next weekend. For as long as they win that game next week, for as long as they ensure that they knock out, a Barcelona. So really, Pedri, it is fairly strong. But again, the starting 11 tells you what they're thinking about. Alex Baena did not start that game against Barcelona. Julio Diaz, Marc Piboul. Marc Piboul just returned from injury. So again, what does it communicate to you? That whatever happens today, we do not care. What we care most about is what happens next week. You know, what happens next week, midweek, on Tuesday, is what will matter the most. So, anyways, guys, okay, just to wrap up here for tonight. In the other results from the Premier League, we did have earlier on Friday, West Ham beat up against Wolves by 4 goals to 0 to climb out of the relegation zone and push Tottenham Hotspurs downwards. So that was a very, very significant result for West Ham. Nonetheless, they will have to wait for the result between Tottenham Hotspurs tomorrow away at the Stadium of Light. Then a 2-2 draw between Everton and Brentford, and then a 2-0 victory for Brighton away to Burnley, and then very late on that 2-0 victory for Liverpool against Fulham. Goes from Rion Gumoha and Mohamed Salah were enough to ensure victory. So, guys, allow me to wrap it up here because I'm a bit tired. I would have loved to continue this conversation, but it's been a very long day. So many kilometers of travel, very little sleep I had last night, so I need to relax a bit. It's going to be a very long day for me tomorrow as well. But yeah, it's been a pleasure doing this. We'll continue to just the weekend results. You say 6 players from the academy. Yeah, I've noticed that, Pedri. I mean, that tells you what's on their minds. So have a blessed night. Let's catch up again tomorrow for the Sunday night broadcasts. I digest more of what has transpired from the weekend. Go sleep, boy. I give you permission. Oh, Pedri, don't you owe me a cup of coffee? Just thinking out loud or trying to remember. Anyways, have a blessed night. I wish you the best of luck going into next week. Of course, we'll have time to discuss those games when they come. And yeah, let's hope for the best for all our respective teams. Stay blessed. Oh, guys, why am I doing bad manners? To you, Pedri, to you, Adash, Pressing Kosi, the Sports Hub, Raymond Kangumba, who else? LFC, Nicole, Ora, and every single one of you that has been part of tonight's broadcast. Thank you so much for always sparing the time to be with us. Have a blessed night, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye-bye for now.